That's right. He is competing in Tuesday's primary as a Republican candidate for president, of course. But now there's word Ron Paul could still be considering a run as a third-party candidate if he should fail to win the GOP presidential nomination. Just how serious are these reports? Doug Wead joins us, senior advisor to the presidential candidate, Ron Paul. Doug, great to have you back with us today. Appreciate it. Before we get to that, I want to run through New Hampshire and South Carolina. First, New Hampshire, the Rasmussen poll has Ron Paul down by more than 20 points. And I must say that is very consistent with the Real Clear Politics average of polls. So given that fairly large deficit with just days to go, are you discouraged, Doug?
No, we're not discouraged. The Marist NBC poll that came out last night asked who is the true conservative, and Ron Paul won that over every other candidate. And the exit polling in Iowa showed that about 25% of those Republicans identified themselves as liberals and moderates, and they all went to Romney. The rest were conservative, 5% undecided. The conservatives were split by 5 candidates. And so that's the real battle. If you were in Romney's camp, they're not as sanguine as the pundits on television are about Romney's chances,
but Doug,
because it's overwhelming.
Roughly 40% of independents are eligible to vote there and will vote there. They're expected to in New Hampshire. Those are not conservatives.
No, that's right. And independents are not the liberals. Independents, we did very well with them in Iowa. In fact, we had 48% of the independent vote in Iowa, and the other 5 candidates split the rest. There's a lot of reasons that we're hopeful, Greg. They're a little bit different than the other candidates. Right. We see them as running for power, and so in order to get money, they have to win, or people won't give to them. Right. We represent a cause, and whether we win or come in third, people will still give us money because the cause doesn't go away.
I know,
so we're in for a marathon race.
You know, this isn't horseshoes. You got to win. You know, coming in second or third or fourth doesn't work for you. And it's not just New Hampshire, Doug, but South Carolina. I mean, Congressman Paul has now dropped there, South Carolina, to 4th place in the latest Rasmussen poll with a scant 11%. 11%, Doug. And a separate Time poll finds him down by 25 points, which is consistent with the Real Clear Politics poll average, which has him down by 22%. Now, look, Doug, why is that happening? Just 11% of the vote. Is it because all of the, if I can call them, alternatives to Romney, the anti-Romneys, and whether it be, Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich or Rick Perry, they're drawing away votes from Ron Paul, or at least splitting the votes, which elevates Mitt Romney?
It's interesting. We see it the other way around. For example, when we came out of Iowa, we actually got a very good bump in New Hampshire, up 4 points. And you have to remember, we were at 6 points in South Carolina. Now at 11, we're on the move. And our template has not been laid in South Carolina. That's just now happening. If there's any lesson, Greg, we've learned from this cycle, it's that anything can happen.
Sure.
And so campaigns that can survive and stay in this marathon race, lightning can strike.
All right.
And it is especially important to understand the rules were changed to help Romney. For example, not winner take all in the South, so the evangelicals couldn't wipe him out.
Front-loaded and all that. I got to move forward to
that works for us.
The real question that was in our introduction to you, Doug, and that was the interview yesterday with the Huffington Post. Congressman Paul was asked repeatedly if he would run as a third-party candidate if he didn't win the GOP nomination, and he twice responded by saying, "I'll decide that later." Doug, why not flatly rule it in or out? Why hedge like that? Doesn't that uncertainty undermine his Republican candidacy?
I will tell you, I think I have gotten to the bottom of that whole discussion. I interviewed him yesterday a little bit. Yeah. And he's a Lutheran, and he was raised as a strict Lutheran, and 2 of his brothers are ministers, and there's a very strict teaching, Christian teaching, let your yes be yes, your no be no. And while he's an absolutist about moral issues, he's not an absolutist about yes or no till he's absolutely sure. So it's a philosophical thing with him. It's not
based
some
on your
kind of game he's
conversation with him, you said you interviewed him about this yesterday. it is fair to say that Ron Paul will not rule out a third-party presidential bid. True?
He doesn't want to do it, but has he ruled it out? Absolutely no. But is that like an ordinary person saying yes or no? No, this is Ron Paul, and he's not going to absolutize it. There is a greater danger. There's a greater danger.
What's that?
And the danger's not Ron Paul. The danger is his supporters. When I was in Iowa, I spent hours with these young people who were not just statistics, and 9 out of 10 of them told me they voted for Barack Obama last time. Some of them are very upset with how they feel Ron Paul's treated in the debates.
But Doug, if he runs as a third-party candidate, he could suck votes away from the Republican nominee, thus ensuring the re-election of Barack Obama. Does he really want to do that?
No, but my point is, even if he endorses the candidate, if he comes in and says, I'm supporting this candidate, and works out an agreement, maybe they'll audit the Federal Reserve, maybe they'll stop some of the corruption in Washington. If he gets his deal, some of these young people won't necessarily follow Ron Paul if they feel that the Republican Party has made them unwelcome. I think it's very important right now to bring all these new young people into the fold and make them part of a new Republican majority.
Look, and I understand that Ron Paul wants to and expects to be perhaps the Republican nominee, but if he's not, would he prefer Barack Obama or any of the other remaining GOP candidates?
I don't think he'd prefer Barack Obama. But there is concern because Barack Obama's #1 donor is Goldman Sachs. Mitt Romney's #1 donor is Goldman Sachs. They both support TARP. They both supported the bailouts. They both won't audit the Federal Reserve. Let it operate as some secret organization. There's concern. The people who support us have lost their homes. They've lost the value of their IRAs. They've lost the value of their homes and their jobs. And the people who support Mitt Romney are elitist bankers. It goes right down the list: Barclays, J.P. Morgan. People are fed up with the corruption, and they would like to see Mitt Romney stand up and make some bold claims of change.
Doug Wead, always fun talking to you. Always an interesting conversation, and I appreciate your being with us today. Best of luck to you.
Thank you. Best of luck to you, too.
Ron Paul will join anchor Chris Wallace coming up tomorrow. Check your local listings for that special one-on-one interview. We're going to have full coverage of the first in the nation New Hampshire primary, all beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, January 10th. Brett Baer, Megyn Kelly will lead the coverage live from Manchester.